Welcome. I'm Ted Sheriff, Park Manager of Quail Hollow State Park. Quail Hollow State Park, in conjunction with the Quail Hollow Volunteer Association, recognizing a need for greater public awareness of the declining condition of our natural environment, hosted a roundtable discussion on environmental values. Experts in many areas of environmental study were invited to the park to offer presentations covering a wide range of interests pertaining to various topics of our natural world and our human role in it. The following program is one in a series to emerge from that discussion. Hello and welcome to our roundtable discussion of environmental values. Welcome to Quail Hollow State Park. And I truly want to welcome you to Quail Hollow State Park. It's a pleasure to do so. And Quail Hollow State Park, briefly, is a little different type park for the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, and we're real pleased that it is. It fills a special niche in the Ohio Department of Natural Resources and has a very particular focus. And some of you may know the park well. Some of you may have noticed on your visit here today, on your entrance, that you didn't see the typical lake and campground and so on. And that's part of that special niche and special theme of this state park. It is devoted to the educational study and appreciation of our outdoor world. And as a part of our pursuit of that theme, we are real pleased to have you here today with us for a roundtable discussion on environmental values, which will be sociologically oriented, should be applicable, should have something for every one of you, if not many things, to think about and take home and perhaps live out, we hope, in the future. There's a number of deserving thank yous which I wish to extend before we open the actual discussion portion. And I want to first of all thank the other half of the steering committee, perhaps first and foremost for a great deal of devotion and hard work in presenting this and bringing it together. And you'll be seeing her throughout the day, and that's Park Naturalist Barbara Fiolka. Would you raise? Thank you.
Our next panelist held at one time the same position that I hold now. He was, in fact, the first naturalist here at Quail Hollow State Park, and he just currently became naturalist at Olympic National Park in Washington. And so maybe that's the future for me as well, hopefully. Bruce Lombardo coordinated interpretation programs for not only Quail Hollow, but throughout the whole state, so he had more responsibility than I did. And also with the National Park Service, he worked as a naturalist at Assateague Island as well. Since 1987, he has been the program director at Wilderness Southeast, a nonprofit educational organization that uses parks and wilderness areas as outdoor classrooms. And we welcome Bruce.
Well, I'm delighted to be back here. Favorite place of mine to address this topic of eco-travel. Feel like I'm coming home. I have to say, after spending a busy summer season giving programs to campers at Olympic National Park, I'm resisting this compulsion I feel to lead you all in a rousing chorus of "She'll Be Coming Around the Mountain" before I give my program. What is the most important force in global environmental preservation today? I think I have the answer right here in my back pocket. Money. Profits. That may come as a surprise to you. It came as a surprise to me. I spent, as Barbara said, 6 years, 8 years, working as a national park ranger naturalist, state park ranger naturalist. And then even in my eco-tour days, for 6 years as the program director for Wilderness Southeast, leading programs to wilderness areas in Southeast and Latin America, we were a nonprofit organization, an educational organization. So as you can see, I've never really had a real job. ever. And I've never had to deal with profits. And so this has come slowly to me. Environmental education, environmental lobbies, environmental groups all play their part in the role of preservation of endangered places, wilderness areas. But really only in affluent countries like our own does profit play a secondary role now to environmental historical preservation lobbies. In modern culture, at least, environmental ethics are linked to affluence. The subsistence farmer in Brazil who is trying to eke out a living from the land and raise his family doesn't have much time to concern himself with wilderness preservation. Third world countries, the idea of setting aside a tract of land that will never be utilized, its resources never utilized, lumber never cut, never be turned over to agriculture, is just outrageous to them. In these third world areas especially, the people and the government have got to see wilderness preservation as a moneymaker. They are saddled with hyperinflation, outrageous national debt, unlike our own country, right? Low standard of living, and if they can't make money from environmental protection, it's not really going to happen. How can they do that? Well, there's two ways. One would be sustainable yield resource utilization, like logging that doesn't destroy the resource, selective cutting, something like that. But these kinds of resource utilization generally compromise the ecosystem to some degree, at least. The other one is eco-travel, which also has a negative effect, inevitably, of some sort on the resource, but to a much lesser degree. So what is eco-travel? What is ecotourism? It's kind of a buzzword right now, I admit it. It's used for marketing and greenwashing, like so many things. But there really is a difference between eco-travel and normal tourism. Eco-travel, the eco-tourist is someone who's going to a more pristine area, a less developed area, with more or less intact ecosystems or intact cultures. They are interested in learning about those ecosystems or cultures. So they're learning vacations, as opposed to more typical tourism of going to man-made attractions for relaxation, escapism, or entertainment. The family vacation to Wally World and that kind of thing is a different kind of tourism. When an ecotourist comes to a preserved area, he or she needs services. They need food, transportation, lodging, guides, and they are willing to pay for those services. That local entrepreneurs make a profit from the ecotourists is essential toward the value that that local area places on the preservation of the area that the tourists are coming to see. The tax base of the area is increased and expanded, and so the government also sees the preserve as an asset. Also, for the good thing for the government is that it brings in a lot of foreign currency. Tourists are coming to this little country that never were interested in it before because there is a wilderness area there. I can tell you, as a National Park Ranger, it is amazing how many, especially Japanese and Europeans, come to our national parks. There have been times when I thought that German would be justifiably a required second language for a National Park Ranger, especially in the off-season. Tourists from those areas do not come to the United States to experience our deep cultural heritage, because we're new at that. We don't have that much. They're coming here primarily to see our national parks. And the same is true to these third world countries. These preserves, this is just the beginning. Ecotourism is expanding, and as the globe is more developed and world population increases, these preserved areas are going to become increasingly attractive for ecotourism. So setting aside a preserve now is also a long-term investment for a country. Well, when we think of global preservation, our minds automatically almost return to tropical rainforests, don't they? Because that's where the greatest biodiversity is, that's where the most damaging extinction rates can occur. And it's quite the rave now to talk about tropical rainforest preservation. So I have a few slides to show you about ecotourism in tropical rainforest areas and what maybe some ecotourist options for you could be and what the effects of ecotourism have been in these tropical rainforests. We're going to take you to Costa Rica, which is a ecotourism preservation success story, a real exception to the rule of chaos in Central America, that has set aside over 12% of its land in strictly preserved government areas, government-controlled areas, highest of any forested country in the world. And their ecotourism industry has skyrocketed in just one decade. Ecotourism has become their second leading national industry of the whole nation, and probably even has, since the last surveys, surpassed, in fact, the leading industry, which was coffee export. And I suspect now that ecotourism, specifically ecotourism, is the leading industry of the nation now because of their tremendous park system. So let's go to Costa Rica. And I'm going to take you first to one of the jewels in the crown of the Costa Rican National Park System, Corcovado National Park, probably the best example of lowland tropical rainforest on the Pacific anywhere in the world. It's a remote park, an almost intact ecosystem that has no roads into it. I'm going to take you on a ecotour guided backpack trip through this park. There are no roads to it. An all-day bus trip takes us to a river, and we just backpack up this river until we get to the park boundary. And when we step into the park, we are in virgin tropical rainforest, and we're all thrilled to be there. Huge emergence, lush vegetation. But at Corcovado is good for backpacking because it has a pronounced dry season. And usually you wouldn't want to be backpacking in a rainforest, but the dry season allows for me to walk around with my shirt off and not worry about getting bit by bugs so much. And the temperatures are rather cool. We can see the characteristic buttress trunks of the tropical rainforest trees. We'll take rests at intervals and we'll look around, and I'll show you some different creatures and the interesting botany of the area, like this little anolis lizard. You see giant leafcutter ant mounds, ant colonies 5-6 feet high and 30 feet across. Giant strangler fig trees whose buttresses can house many animals in the convoluted folds of the trunk. Beautiful flowers like the red passion flower that attracts hummingbirds. And I'll show you different plants and animals and talk to you as part of your guide, your ecotour experience about the pollination biology or the dispersal mechanisms that all these symbiotic relationships create. In Corcovado National Park, there is the largest population of wild scarlet macaws in the country, noisy birds, and other great birds to see. Wild mammals tend to be, like almost anywhere in the world but the African plains, they're kind of hard to see because they only come out at night. In tropical rainforests, there's many places to hide, so you're not really going to see a jaguar, probably. But although there are many of them there, we'll see many tracks of jaguars. And if we look closely, we'll see that there are, one of the attractions of a tropical rainforest is that there are diurnal mammals, big furry creatures that we can see in the form of monkeys. Here in the temperate zone, we're lucky if we see a squirrel, but in the Corcovado there are 4 different species of monkeys, like the little tiny squirrel monkey. And things will fall out of the canopy world, like epiphytes for us to see, and it will be hard for us to see that the canopy is really the place where it's all happening in the tropical rainforest up there, where so many epiphytic plants grow, like bromeliads and orchids, and many animals live that never do come down to the ground. On one trip that I took through there, it was the 6th person in line that looked down at the side of the trail and noticed that there was an 8-foot boa constrictor stretched out along the trail, and before the end of the group could get there, the boa constrictor started to move up, so my Costa Rican guide that was helping me grabbed it, picked it up, and passed it around, and we could all feel the muscles in this powerful constrictor snake's body before we let it go. Another interesting thing that happened on that trip is we were looking at a little oxbow pond off the river, and we noticed two huge animal heads sticking out of the water. And what could they be but the largest mammal, the largest creature in the tropical rainforests of the New World? And they were tapirs wallowing in the water like pigs, this three-toed relative of the horse. The rangers in this national park don't wear Smokey the Bear hats, don't have much in the way of uniforms to wear, but they are diligent protectors of this park. It's not just a park on paper, it really is a protected ecosystem. And we employ cooks. We camp at the ranger stations along the way, and we employ local women to cook for us and provide us our meals. And one of the ranger stations is on a long stretch of wild Pacific coastline, just beautiful. And this is very hot during the day, so we have to hike it at night, and occasionally we can find nesting sea turtles coming up, like the leatherback sea turtle. So this park, and if this leatherback sea turtle's already started nesting, it's all right to, laying eggs, all right to approach it. We won't disturb it. And this park is providing valuable nesting habitat for a very endangered species. Eventually, toward the end of our walk on the beach, we come to the end of our backpack trip, a beautiful waterfall that comes off a cliff and crashes right down on the beach after our long, hot beach walk. We're refreshed. We've come to a cove where we are picked up by a local boat operator who takes us back to civilization. So that is one example of an ecotour in a tropical rainforest park where some of the local people did benefit from our travel there. There really aren't any facilities inside the national parks because they're strictly preserved. So we were camping, employing some locals for various services along the way. When I said 12% of Costa Rica was preserved, and I said that was the highest, most people would agree that probably 5 to 10% is the maximum that any country's people are ever going to allow its government to set aside in this way. The resources never be utilized. Does anybody know how much of our nation is preserved in national park lands and preserved areas? It's less than 5%. Less than 5%. There's a limit, and always, when I was a national park ranger, I was always thinking, wow, the government should set aside more and more wilderness areas, more and more preserves. Well, there is a limit to how much people are going to tolerate that, especially in the third world, but even in this world, look, this country, look how much trouble we have setting aside new preserves against lobbying pressures from timber and mining interests and things like that. So, how do we preserve the rest of Costa Rica, for instance? Well, let me introduce you to Amos Bean. This man here in the beard is a remarkable individual. A research scientist, botanist, at one time station manager of the Organization for Tropical Studies La Selva Station, and he decided he was tired of listening to people, his colleagues, complain about how the government should set aside new land, because he knew that wasn't going to happen. So how is the rest of the land going to be established? And he established his own private preserve adjacent to a national park, effectively extending the national park land. Well, it was a bigger undertaking than he ever thought. He knew that ecotourism was going to be the key to making this private preserve work. He had to build a road. And building a road through tropical rainforests has been more difficult than he ever thought, because whatever you touch in a tropical rainforest turns to mud. Laying down the corduroy wood, splitting logs by hand at first with just a few helpers, turning sledgehammers into mushroom-shaped pieces of metal. Unfortunately, the relationship between people and wilderness is such that whatever is easily accessible does not remain wilderness for very long. And so he picked a not very accessible place, and people are carted up there in tractor-pulled carts for 3 hours in a bumpy ride. Eventually, though you're going through miles of slash and burned areas that were not saved, that were just cut in the last 5-10 years, eventually you come to secondary growth and eventually virgin tropical rainforest that he saved from the saw blades of farmers. Cross a river, beautiful rainforest river that falls into a gorgeous tropical rainforest waterfall nearby, to which he has built his lodge, tourist lodge, on this preserve called Rara Avis. From the deck of the preserve, you look out over a canopy of virgin tropical rainforest. You've got private bath in your room, so if you don't like the backpacking scenario, this is for you, perhaps, even though getting there is tough. And during the day, you can take day hikes unencumbered by your backpack, learning about the various aspects of the tropical rainforest, wearing your mud boots, getting rained on, although your rain gear can be assisted at intervals by big leaves like the Xanthosoma robustum, learning about stilt root trees and why they grow stilt roots in the rainforest, the various kinds of weird convoluted vines like monkey ladder vine that stretches when the tree that it's attached to falls like a spring, the different kinds of houseplant type plants that we're used to, like philodendron, and we see the roots hanging down out of the canopy that is the source of wicker furniture that comes from philodendron relatives. The creatures, the animals that live there, again, are very hard to find, like the little jaguarundi cat or weasel cat that's nocturnal. We can see signs of them. At Rara Avis, one furry mammal, it's not a monkey that we do see during the day, is the arboreal anteater called Tamandua, because it is somewhat diurnal and it seems to be so deaf, dumb, and blind that it doesn't seem to notice our presence there. It uses its nose to go from termite nest to arboreal termite nest. And down on the forest floor, there are little fascinating creatures like the colorful poison dart frogs. And everywhere, there are blue morpho butterflies. In this case, the Rara Avis project has allowed an area to be preserved, not by the government, but directly from ecotourism. He has employed only local people as guides and cooks and all the transportation services involved. And the neighboring town of Las Horquetas has expanded tremendously in terms of the standard of income. Standard of living. Income is much greater. And you can tell the people are just happier. And whereas when Amos first arrived with his kind of harebrained scheme, people were a little bit dubious. Now, they just love the Rara Avis project. It has provided many of them with jobs, and tourism are coming through. There's restaurants and hotels in Las Horquetas that weren't there just 5 years ago. So ecotourism can be a very positive force toward the preservation of an area. Environmental education, environmental lobby groups are doing what they can, but environmental education of the world is many generations away. We don't have generations. Some of these areas are critically endangered and need something immediate. And ecotourism can provide that immediate moneymaker that these third world countries need in order to see preservation as a good thing. How can you become an ecotourist? How many of you have ever been on an eco-tour? If this is something that might interest you, you've never done it before, the best thing to do is just go get yourself a copy of Outside Magazine and look in the back. And there are eco-tours all over the world. You can take cruises to Antarctica and go see the penguins, African safaris, Amazon riverboat trips. It's endless. There are lots of different kinds, and we tend to monitor each other's activities. There are pitfalls of ecotourism, as I mentioned briefly, especially with ecotourism to primitive cultures, which I, for one, always opposed when I was the program director at Wilderness Southeast, because there you're dealing with some negative effects, I think, that can come from ecotourism. But certainly in terms of environmental protection, at least, it can be a very positive force, And we monitor each other, the different companies do, that if one company is doing something that's excessive, that's bad for the resource, that word gets out. And you can ask around, you can call up these companies that you see advertised and ask for their free catalogs, and they will be happy to send you one. Lastly, environmental ecotourism is a definite benefit to the traveler. It is a form of environmental education, extended environmental education, where we take people out into the wilderness and let them experience it. It's experiential education. It's not just watching the documentary on television. And I have had, probably through ecotourism, although I've been a ranger naturalist and led many hikes and given people all sorts of information about the outdoors, I've probably had more positive experiences through my ecotours as far as really seeing changes in people's attitudes about the environment. They are brought back in touch with their evolutionary roots that technological society has removed us so far from. I'll never forget, one of the things that so often happens when I lead an ecotour is that the people are touched and they don't want to go home. And they'll shake their head and they'll say, "Oh, Bruce, we have to go back to the real world." And I'll never forget one of my co-leaders' responses to that. They said, "No, you're leaving the real world." Thank you very much.
Thanks for watching. We hope you'll join us again when we present the next segment of a roundtable discussion on environmental values.